Okay. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to say them in the panel chat, and I will try and ask Mark them in a timely manner. So we'll just introduce ourselves. I'm Annie with Ganbatte, and this is Mark with, you're with a lot of things, right?
People locally will know me if you're obviously into manga and anime. If you, for example, buy those products from Collector's Edge downtown, you'll know me from there on Sunday and Monday. You'll know me as a writer, as Mark Allard-Will. Various comic books and graphic novels I've written, ranging from arcade, which is like video game themed, an adventure graphic novel that is for most ages, probably 10, 11 up. Last year I had, 2 years ago now, 2019, I had The Burn in Black, The Legend of Black Shuck, which was an adaptation, a horror adaptation, or reimagining, I should say, of the folklore of Black Shuck, a monster from back home in Suffolk, the rural county of Suffolk in England, which is where I originate from. And supposedly, if the local folklore is to be believed, it is the same monster that inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to write The Hound and the Baskervilles. The story goes that supposedly he was on vacation in the neighbouring county of Norfolk, and somebody mentioned that to him in passing about the monster, the folkloric monster of Black Shuck, and supposedly that's what inspired it. So I wanted to pay homage to back home, back where I come from, to rural England, and so that's what I released. Outside of writing for graphic novels as well, you probably see me, or have seen me over the past year, interviewing other creators over on the Cuckoo's Nest Press Facebook page, and even recently on the Ganbatte page I interviewed Shaldo, who is a rapper from the UK. He's also a manga writer, which is really interesting that a rapper writes a manga, but it's a beautiful manga that, not to self-indulge too much, but it is available at Collector's Edge and available exclusively there with signed copies. That's
For sure, like hip hop and manga and anime, like a lot of that go hand in hand. There's a lot of like rap and rock that like for example, like they just have random people rapping in some animes nowadays, and like I don't know, Samurai Champloo, like some of the classics, like that's a big prevalent part of it. So it's always really cool to see the crossovers and how they've grown into modern things for us now.
Yeah, and I actually didn't realise that crossover. I thought it was quite unique that this rapper had written a manga, which it is.
It is, for sure. It like comes and goes. You just see it, and like when you do see it, and it's usually done so well and so articulately that you really love it. You always have such interesting backstories. Just like all your experience. How do you feel your experiences, like, and your life and culture played a part in the development of this new book that you're coming out with?
So the book that's coming out is coming out on February 16th, February 16th, 2022. It's called Siegfried Dragon Slayer, and to some extent, my life experiences do play a part in that, because when I was growing up, I grew up in rural England, on the east coast of England, and I didn't realise until I grew up that the area I was growing up in was formerly what would have, almost 1,000 years ago now, been known as the Danelaw. So that was the area of England that had been captured and colonised by the Vikings, by the pagan Vikings. And so there is this sense in England, and something that I found more when I came to Canada, that paganism plays a root in a lot of English things, a lot of British things, especially in rural Britain, that you don't really realise until you come to a country like Canada, where Canada's not like the United States. It's not outwardly like all in on this like Protestantism or Catholicism or whatever, but it's slightly more religious than Britain for sure, and slightly more Abrahamic, again for sure. But another thing that played a big part in that from my life experiences is my mum. So when I was growing up as a young kid, that was before the internet is what it is today, and certainly before it had ever come to rural Britain.
For sure.
So we had like family hardcover encyclopedias. I don't know if anyone remembers having those.
I had those. I made essays with those. I used to love E because it had like really beautiful pictures of elephants.
Yeah, and so the thing that really captured me, and again with the beautiful pictures, the beautiful illustrations, is I asked my mum once, and I can remember this vividly, like I must have been about 6 or something like that, but I asked my mum, where do the days of the week come from? And she opened up the encyclopedias and found a page where, and it's got, of course, because all the days other than Saturday are named after the Norse gods. And it's got these beautiful illustrations of the Norse gods, and from 6 years old I fell in love with, I didn't really fully appreciate what they were at the time, but that was when I fell in love with pagan mythology, ancient pagan mythology. At the time Norse mythology, but I've fallen in love with lots of other ones since. And so that all of that has informed me to come full circle back to writing Siegfried Dragonslayer, which is, and I've got to be careful not to say adaptation, because it's not really an adaptation, but it's a reimagining of the Volsunga saga. So the Volsunga saga is this, it's not as important as the Edda, and the Edda is taken really seriously by mythology fans. But there's this, culturally, in terms of cultural importance, the Volsunga saga is right up there, because it's what inspired Tolkien, at least partially, to write The Hobbit. And when the book comes out in February, if you do decide to grab a copy, you'll see it in there straight away. You'll see that Fafnir the dragon is what became Smaug. You'll see that the ring and Varanor is what become the One Ring. You'll see that Rhaegon is what became the malicious Gollum, and all of these kind of things. And yeah, so my life experiences took me full circle from that moment, sitting down with my mum, with the hardcover family encyclopedias, and like seeing those beautiful illustrations of like Thor and Odin, and you know, for all the different days of the week.
Yeah, that's amazing that you had that experience so young, that it could like develop into something so far down in your life, later down in your path in your life. That's crazy. Like,
yeah, and it's, to me, it's always remained that beautiful to me. The same as that, the beauty of that moment with my mum, because you're at that age where you look up to mum, and mum is God, right? And so it's like one God showing you these other gods, right? In that sense, but mythology has remained that beautiful for me, because when you really come to understand pagan mythology, and especially pagan mythology, like Abrahamic mythology is like, it's all fire and brimstone. But pagan mythology is the origin of human storytelling. It's how we described things before we had science. It's how we understood the world before we had cartographers and all of this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so crazy how everything's so interconnected, and yeah, brilliant. How did you come up with the different names that you use in your novel? Is there anything? Because I find usually that question always, like, some people have like, oh, or does that give away too much?
No, not at all. So the names do change from the source mythology, and most of them are carried over. Like Rhaegon and Fafnir are carried over. Obviously, the gods are carried over. But the main one, the titular one, is Siegfried. I changed his name to that kind of Anglo-Germanic Siegfried, just because I wanted it to relate to readers around the world, because it is going to be published internationally through Renegade Arts Entertainment out of Canmore. And to be honest with you, Scandinavian names are going to lose people, especially Scandinavian names that are that Scandinavian, because the original name of that character is Sigurd, and that's not really a name that's going to carry weight in this mostly universal worldwide English that we have now. But Germanic does in that sense. But it's also because the Volsunga saga has inspired adaptations before, and the most famous one is, of course, Wagner's The Ring Cycle, or what is it in German? Oh, this is embarrassing because I can actually speak German. I can't remember it.
You've been in Canada so long now.
Yeah, it's anyway, it's inspired Wagner's opera, and in that opera he is called Siegfried. So it's kind of this way of paying heed to the ring cycle, paying heed to the German mythology that inspired. It actually inspired, I think, post-Christian German mythology in Das Nibelungenlied, which means the Song of the Nibelungs, or the Ballad of the Nibelungs. And so the Volsungs, by the way, is the family name, or Volsunga, because A is how they would pluralize in Old Norse. But then it was translated to Nibelungs. The family is the Nibelungs in both the Ring Cycle and the German Das Nibelungenlied. So yeah, it's kind of that difference in name is kind of like paying heed to what it inspired, but also making sure that it's more global friendly than the original mythology. But otherwise, the names are very faithful to the Volsunga saga.
Okay. Coyote has a question here. When writing stories based in mythology, do you find it hard to subvert expectations, or is it hard to foreshadow events properly?
So it's kind of the opposite, actually. What's going to happen is people that are academics, and the reason, before I get to the full answer there, just to give background to what my answer is going to be, my reason for wanting to write this graphic novel and to reimagine it from the translations into something as reader-friendly as a graphic novel is because the translations, they just stay in the stuffy halls of academia, and so that means that the elite readers are reading this. It's not accessible to everyone, and that is so sad to me, because mythology is meant to be for everybody. And that upsets me. There's another thing about Norse mythology that upsets me, which you'll know if you've been on the internet ever. But I'm not going to get into that because I really don't want to. It upsets me. But yeah, because I don't like Norse mythology being appropriated for that bad thing. But anyway, to get away from that, what I'm going to say is that the people that have read the translations are going to come into this with expectations. So the hard thing about adapting this is that you're going to face criticisms for what you've done. Even though I'm making it accessible to readers, even though I'm reimagining it in a way that it's going to read like a movie, that is going to... so the act structure of it is changed, because originally it was meant to be stanza, like sung poetry. So originally in pagan Denmark, Norway, Sweden, wherever, it would have been sung in mead halls by drunks, drunk Vikings and drunk bards. So it was originally like a 5-act stanza. So you've got to change it to a 3-act story, and I decided to do a 3-act, make it real filmic. So you have to change things around and the placement of things. So it's a complete reimagining, almost ground up, but with keeping the beats of the mythology faithful. So the main difficulty in translating mythology in this way is going to be the criticisms, the critics. I will never be able to appease them, and that's fine, because I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it to bring this to more and more people.
For sure. When writing stories from mythology, do you tend to stick strictly to the mythos, or do you treat it fluidly and change certain aspects to make it unique and different?
Yeah, I've tried to stay as faithful as possible, but with a complete reimagining. So I know that sounds very contradictory, but what I mean by that is if you go and read the translation, because it's meant to be this song, it was meant to be sung by drunks in mead halls in ancient pagan Denmark and all of this. It's meant to have this comedy aspect to it. And Norse mythology, if you've ever read it, it's so full of comedy. Like there's this one time where Loki, many times during his tricks as a trickster, realizes he's got himself in too deep and has to do more tricks to get himself out of it, which is how we got Sleipnir, Odin's horse. I'll let you Google that one after this. It's a wild ride. You'll have a lot of fun reading that. And there's also like a few others with Thor, which are really funny. But when Fafnir is, and spoiler alert here, well, I mean, it's public domain, you would have found this out anyway. When Fafnir the dragon is slain, when he's killed in the end, it's just, there's this very quick, he's stabbed by this young boy, Sigurd, or Siegfried as we've called him in this, and he just gives this one long diatribe, and it's obviously meant to be funny because this diatribe that is like huge and expansive and all of this on its dying breath, and you can see that it's meant to be, when it was performed way back when, it was meant to be hilarious, because how can this long diatribe be done on one dying breath? Well, I've changed that to be this big dramatic action scene where he's not stabbed straight away, and there's this big dramatic action scene, and you've got this huge Fafnir looming down on Siegfried, and we want this moment where he realizes that he is just a 13-year-old boy, and that his ignorance and his foolhardiness has got him in way too deep. So it's like more about changing the emotional impetus of it. I've changed it more to a drama. There is some comedy elements in there still, but they're very muted compared to the original, and that is because the original, there is a lot of drama there, and the drama is meant to come through, but it doesn't come through to the end. And again, that's because it's meant to be a performance piece, but when you change it to written literature like a graphic novel, my feeling is that it should be reimagined and that drama should come out. Yeah, that's my feeling on it, for sure.
Stories that originate from ancient myths sometimes have roots in outdated mindsets. What kind of challenges do you face to bring that story to a modern audience?
One that leaps to mind straight away. There is something that I cut out of from the original myth. Well, actually from the translations. I'm not sure if it was intended to be this way in the myth. It's meant to be like some magic when Sigurd's father, Sigmund, whom he never knew because he was killed before he grew up, when there's this scene where he's caught in the forest that surrounds this enemy king's castle, and the sister who has been captured by the king but is allowed to leave the castle for whatever reason, she is allowed to go and tend to him every night, and she decides that she's going to use what they would call dark runic magic, and use that dark runic magic to turn into this female witch that is not the sister, and then go and get impregnated by the brother, so that at least if he dies, there's this there'll be a child to survive on beyond him, and I'm not sure if it was meant to read that way. I think it was meant to read as the magic is, takes them beyond a genial relationship, but it reads as incest in the modern world. So that got cut out for sure. I was like, yeah, that doesn't need. You could still be faithful without that being in there. Just
for sure.
That gone. And that definitely wouldn't have been family. I'm aiming for like 12, 13 upwards, and that definitely wouldn't have been friendly to that audience if we had that in there. For various reasons, including the incest. So yeah, it's certainly our world has changed since we were originally pagans, and some of it for the better, some of it for the worse. Some of it for the worse for global warming, for sure, but some of it for the better in the sense of we don't kind of view stuff that way anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Let's bring up the artist here. What were some parameters that you thought, like, that you gave the artist that you're like, this is how this story has to be interpreted? I need these color schemes, or like, was there any way that you wanted your story produced by the artist with some of the reoccurring themes that you might have seen in art following mythology over the years?
So I worked with Jasmine Redford on this book, and I believe Jasmine's watching today. Oh, there she is. Jasmine, hey, how's it going? So I'll let Jasmine talk in a minute here, but what I'll say for now is that I didn't really give any real strict briefs to Jasmine. I just said, this is the age range of this character. They should kind of look a little bit grizzled and old, or young and pomp and full of themselves or whatever, but I didn't really go beyond that, because the reason I chose Jasmine is because of her stunning artwork in the first place. And it has, Jasmine does coffee painting, ink-line cross-hatching, which it looks so fantastic. It has this Dark Ages feel to it, which is the Vikings lived in what would have been Britain and Scandinavia's Dark Ages. And so that is why I chose Jasmine. So free reign is really what happened there. There were some times when I'd send back a page and say, hey, this perspective on this panel needs to change, but that's commonplace when working with illustrator anyway.
Brainstorming.
But other than that, it was just like, I let Jasmine have free reign. She sent me character designs, and I would approve them, and there was honestly not a single one where I was like, this isn't what I had in mind. Maybe that's because my script was because I normally write scripts very surgically, so and in that sense very well, very descriptive, I guess. So I guess there really wasn't any need to have that, but it's also Jasmine perceived it so well that there was no need for it to go back. But I'll hand over to Jasmine now so she can include her thoughts on what it was like to illustrate that and what she interpreted as interpreting that mythology.
For sure. You have to unmute.
There we go. Did it work?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Forgive me, I'm so bad at using Discord. I showed up late because I kept trying to enter the room, but then I clicked on something else, and then I booted myself out again, and it was like, ah!
Yeah, it happens. All good.
I guess with regards to the art process, I need a more specific prompt. Can you?
Sorry. What? I thought it was interesting that you gave it like a very like warm and gray color scheme, and it had like that very like dark but also like comforting feel. Like I like just the color schemes I thought was very interesting how you interpreted Mark's work, and I thought you guys like really synced up there, and I really enjoy how it works together.
I can comforting. That's a great adjective for it because it painted in coffee and what's more comfortable than coffee or tea.
Yeah.
Ages ago, I love painting with watercolors, ink wash, and I would find myself out watching my father perform at various jazz festivals, and I would need a medium to paint with. Like, I don't have water around, so I'd experiment, dip the brush into Pepsi, tea, and I thought tea, I bet you tea would be fantastic to paint with, right? Tannic acid, I bet it'll produce a lovely color. It never did, but coffee, surprisingly, it paints so well. It has this glow about it, this lovely sepia tone, which makes it look like an old scroll.
Yeah, I noticed that in some of the like the bridges designs and the castles. You can see the different color tones and stuff like that. It's very interesting.
It works well. You can't layer it as much as you can layer ink wash, but the ink wash you put down a layer, let it dry, and then do it again, and then let it dry, and then do it again, and then let it dry, and you get all these different tones. Coffee has a more severe cutoff. Like after about the third time, it says, no, this is as dark as I'm getting. This is all you get.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I felt the two washes, the ink wash and the coffee wash, They work so well. I would highly encourage anyone to paint with coffee. I have another one here. I don't have the Siegfried stuff in this room, but this is Dante Inferno.
Yeah.
Dante's meeting his teacher in hell. And I'm sending that to one of my instructors.
That's brilliant. Okay, I think we have some more questions for Mark. Stories that originate from ancient... The next question, sorry. What lore or myths do you feel are underrepresented in modern day tales, and which ones are overused in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, seeing as I'm putting out one that's an adaptation of Norse mythology, but Norse mythology, especially since the Marvel movies with Thor and Loki in them, that's been stealing all the spotlight, whereas I think, to me, and again, it's going to sound counterintuitive for me to say this, my personal favourite piece of mythology ever is the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's just such a beautiful work, and it gives this snapshot into this culture that is otherwise lost with the ancient Mesopotamia, like the Sumerians and the Babylonians, Akkadians, all of those. Not to be confused with the Akkadians as in the French, but the other Akkadians with the two Ks. That doesn't really get enough representation, and I think if the right director and writer came along, that could be turned into a beautiful movie. Also, Mesoamerican mythology, like the hero twins from the ancient Mayas. That would be something beautiful to see if the right artists worked on it on a graphic novel, the right writers, or again with a movie. But again, if Hollywood did it, they've got to stop doing this thing where they cast somebody who looks slightly tanned. They've got to get like a proper Latin person to play the Mayans, like that kind of thing, right? They can't keep doing this. It shows and it feels hokey when they do it. And the same thing if it was to be done with the Epic of Gilgamesh. We need to see people of Middle Eastern descent represented if that is done by Hollywood. And maybe Hollywood's worried about doing these things with the criticisms that's come towards them since, but that's why I feel is underrepresented. And then of course really underrepresented is of course, and this is a topic that will come up a lot in the coming weeks anyway, naturally, not related to mythology in particular or storytelling, but is of course the indigenous, and not just in North America. We're talking the Maori in New Zealand, and especially the Aborigine in Australia.
Yeah, for sure. Could you see yourself writing something indigenous themed in the coming future?
There is this one story that I would love to write with permission from the correct tribes, which is the Lakota, South Lakota tribe. So around the South Dakota, just about into North Dakota area. And it's my favorite piece of indigenous, North American indigenous mythology, which is the legend of Ea, or sometimes pronounced the legend of Aya. So Ea or Aya, depending on how you pronounce it, is this giant. And the Lakota people have a lot of belief in giants, so it's very similar to Norse mythology in that sense, like giants and all of this. But giants would plague the lands, and they would go into the camps and they would eat women and children especially. But they would pick off the warriors from the weakest to the strongest, and then once they flatten that camp, onto the next one. And this one tribe manages to cover their tracks and not let too many people know where they are, and they've lived a very happy, content existence away from giants for a long time. But then somebody in the next camp along that they were friends with spills the beans when Ea comes along and starts killing, maiming, eating, and he finds them. But then there's this one warrior, Cloud, who figures out that he can defeat Ea if he rallies the camp together to dig a trench that's big enough, so that what he would do, because he's the strongest warrior, he's got the most muscle on him, Ea definitely wants him as a meal. So he figures out just get him to chase him, and then he's going to jump and do essentially a long jump to clear this trench. And Ea, being as dumb and as oafish as he is, falls in, and because he's so big, the fall is deep enough that as soon as his head connects with the floor, he's dead. And that's the mythology of how they describe this one embankment beside this road in, I believe it's South Dakota. And it's just such an amazing piece of mythology. I love mythology that feels like an action movie.
That sounds brilliant. It sounds brilliant. Like, that'd be really cool. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, if I could get the right permissions from those tribes, from the Lakota peoples, I would love to do something with it, and ideally team up with an indigenous comic artist. I think that would be great.
For sure. Yeah, that'd be like maybe you could travel there and like meet some of the local artists and like work together. Like, that'd be such a brilliant project to like work on. I'll just check the chat, see if there's any questions so far. Do you feel as though some mythos are more restrictive to write than for others?
So by the extent of what's been recorded, because famously or infamously, the pagans did not write much stuff down until you get to the ancient Egyptians and the Romans, of course. But a lot of stuff was lost to time. And the weird thing with the Vikings is we only know of their mythology because it was passed down by oral tradition for almost 300 years, until it came to Snorri Sturluson post-Christianization, once the Iceland had been fully settled. And then he was actually a politician, if you can believe it, of all things. But he had a proclivity for the more pagan aspect, and by all accounts he was somewhat, even though he's beloved now in Iceland for his contributions to Norse mythology, he was apparently disliked at the time because it was all about, obviously, Christianity then. And he was the one who first committed it to the page. And the reason I say that is because it's weird that the Vikings didn't commit stuff to page, because they were the last bastion of paganism. If you know the Vikings, you know that they existed centuries after everything had already become Christian anyway. After the Romans had fallen, after the fall of Rome, Christianity went west. And so yeah, it was centuries after that. But and the reason I bring that up, and just to segue back, is because a lot of history before the Romans, pagan mythology is lost. With the Mayas, who I spoke about earlier, we only really know the hero twin journey and the Xibalba, the realm of the underworld with the seven gods of death, or I can't remember their full names, fathers of death, who tried to kill off the hero twins. That's really all we know from the Mayas. You've got the Pope of Var as well, which is might be accurate or it might be a Christianized retelling. Nobody knows, because they did document stuff to paper actually, but the Spanish burnt it all, which is thank you Spain. Hey. The Catholics burnt it all because it was the work of heathens. There's a lot of stuff that is restricted to work with, like Mayan mythology, because nobody knows the truth of it, other than the hero twin journey. And then some of the Viking stuff gets really brutal. Like I say, most of it's very funny, but some of it is aimed towards, I think, storytelling in meat halls when the men are drunk. was designed to rile up the soldiers, the berserkers, all of the different soldier classes of Vikings, designed to teach them that you've got to be strong tomorrow or whenever when we go out into battle. So some of it was kind of quite brutal. So working with it in the graphic novel form, you have to find a way, especially if you're doing what I'm doing, trying to aim it towards 12 and up, or 11 and up. You kind of have to find a way to put some levity in there, or find things that you can cut.
Yeah. Since you're aiming it at that younger age group, is there any stories that you try and put in as like a teaching point that you're like, maybe someone will learn from this little story that I could put in my book?
Well, I mean, I didn't really have to add it. It comes from the mythology.
It truly does. Yeah.
The mythology itself, it teaches you that foolhardiness and greed are things that, if you don't keep them in check, will be your demise. And you'll see that more in book 2, but in book 1 you get the idea of the foolhardiness for sure.
Yeah, he's like a boy challenging the world. Let's go. Yeah, it's really cute. Sorry, just gonna if you guys have any more questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat. Was there any part of your book that you wanted to dive into that you were really excited to work on, like that you want to explain or go over with us?
Not really, but just to reiterate to everyone that it's not just for kids. It's I've written this for it. It will be a fantastic read for adults.
For everyone, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said at the start here, this is adapting this or reimagining this for the graphic novel medium is about taking it away from the stuffy halls of academia, because this is one of the underrepresented parts of Norse mythology that only people that really get into Tolkien begin to understand about. And it's omitted from things like the pop culture Norse mythology that's come around, like the Vikings on the History Channel or the Marvel movies. It's omitted from all of them, but it's so culturally important because of Tolkien, but just as a piece of mythology itself. So in taking this away from, like I say, to use that adage again, the stuffy halls of academia, it's about kind of giving to you, the reader, the magic that I felt when I was 6 years old with my mum with those encyclopedias.
Definitely. You create a lot of magic with your books. Yeah, it's always cool saying that you have another one coming out. I don't know. You just keep having new projects going on, and it's brilliant. I'm really excited to see. Like, can you imagine? Like, because like COVID kind of slowed a little things down, but you probably got more time to work on things over COVID, hey?
Yes, I mostly worked over COVID. I mostly worked not really on graphic novels, but on interviewing other creators and shining the spotlight on those creators who couldn't do shows, couldn't make money. So that was everyone from Jeff Martin in Edmonton, who's like a fellow indie level comic book creator like myself. He's also on Renegades Arts Entertainment, right the way up to Brian Bolland, who did the Killing Joke. So that was amazing, getting to interview Brian. He was an interesting interview. Really, very polite guy, very nice. And then when it went live on the interview, suddenly he was like this like cold professionalism. I was like, whoa, it was like a switch went. But very nice guy though. I don't mean to take anything away from him, but that did kind of like startle me a bit. I was like, whoa, there's almost got whiplash from that. But yeah, really nice to interview, and being able to do the Brian Bolland interview lended more weight to interviewing the people that have literally just started like a few months ago that I started interviewing. Because I interviewed somebody who has done some artwork on some anthology graphic novels, but has only really started doing her own comic books. And so like people that have literally just started in the industry right the way up to Brian Bolland, and that was pretty awesome. Another thing that I was working on during the pandemic was writing for North Sass Music Zone, and a plug for them is that they're on Facebook and you can go and follow them. And we just try to, as an online zine, sorry, I should say North Sass Music Zine, I keep pronouncing it as sign for some reason. But yeah, North Sass Music Zine, as a small zine online, we just try and give some weight and some attention, some spotlight to independent and some label Saskatchewan musicians and bands. I'm the resident metalhead there, so I've written about metal, but I've had a fantastic time diving into other genres. And yeah, I've covered everything from country music, which I cannot stand country music, but it was really fun getting to work with Saskatchewan country musicians and just seeing the wealth of talent we have here, and I came to appreciate, I still don't like it, but I came to appreciate country music because of working with people like that.
Just being in Saskatchewan, like I feel like you can't, like you say that you just can't stand country music, and then like you watch Telemiracle in the early 2000s, and you're like, I can't hate this. This is somebody's grandma. Like, yeah, I don't know. They just have such a passion for it, and you're like, you know what? That's amazing.
You know what? I respect it. There is a couple of really good country musicians coming up at the moment as well, and it depends what you're into. Like, but the thing that was really fun for me was getting to write about some of the big stalwarts of Canadian metal. Like I've got to write about everyone from Annihilator, which is if you know anything about Canadian metal, you know about Annihilator. And then I've got to write about everyone down to Saskatchewan metal bands and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've been so busy learning. Question from Kaio. Do you find any patterns or similarities from different myths and legends from different eras or regions?
Yeah, the big thing that comes up in almost every region is dragons. And there's a temptation to confuse Chinese dragons in there, but if you know about Chinese mythology, you know that they're not actually dragons. It's different animals that have been spliced together essentially in this kind of, almost like a puppet of mythology. So it's not really a dragon in the mythological sense of a dragon. But like it comes up in Norse mythology with like Fafnir in the Volsunga saga. It comes up with it kind of comes up in like the Aztecs as well. They've got I can't remember his name. It's got all these chs and l's in it. No, I can't remember how to pronounce that name. But it's like a big feathery dragon. Chenchuala? No, I can't remember how to pronounce that name. And yeah, it comes up in pretty much every major pagan mythology. It even comes up in Shinto Japan. Those dragons are actually dragons. Comes up in Thailand, but they're more dragons in the sea, still kind of dragon-esque, but sea dragons, if you will. And that comes up in every region. Something that comes up in every region as well is that the gods, especially in pagan mythology, of course, is that the gods will eventually get tired with humanity and will either end things, or they will try and fight against a natural end of the world to save their precious their loved ones, which is us. And so in Norse mythology you get Ragnarok, where the gods try to rally against this demise that Loki has woven with his 3 children and the wife that he never told them about, which is Hel. And No, Hel is one of the children. What am I on about? Who's the wife again? Well, anyway, it's and then in like the Mayas, the one thing we do know is that the one thing that's been confirmed from the Popol Vuh as being origin is that there were originally, now which way round does it go? People were made from wheat first, I think, and then maize, sorry, or same thing, but and then they were flooded out because the gods realized that they weren't strong enough, so then they had to make once the land dried, they made people from clay. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it comes up that the gods they've had enough of people like Gilgamesh throwing their weight around when he's just a mortal. So they decide to flood the earth, and so that comes up a lot. Those themes come up a lot. Is dragons and the gods eventually coming to their wits' end with us.
Yeah. When writing for different mythos that come from vastly different regions, example Norse mythos versus Mayan mythos, how much do you depend on the artwork to help differentiate and accentuate the uniqueness of each culture?
If I was going to work with something with the Mayas, I would find an artist or commission an artist who I know from their portfolio can do something that's very, very rich and very bright colors, and probably very thin outlines, not something very thick. So you want something very thin, and because you want to put lots of jungle growth in there, of course, being South Mexico and North Guatemala, very bright colors, very bright greens, reds, the jade, because the main jewelry they had was jade, and all of that kind of stuff, bright oranges, all of that kind of thing. Whereas with Norse mythology, I definitely wanted Jasmine, because not only is it a beautiful fantasy style artwork, but she has this color tone that, like you said, has a comforting feel to it, but also has this really beautiful Dark Ages, real kind of that Dark Ages feel to it.
Definitely. Do you ever see yourself writing the Norse mythology with a visit to modern society?
I had this idea in my head once of like doing what's loosely known as myth punk, where you take elements of mythology and put it into your own kind of fantasy story, and I wanted to do like an urban mythology, what they call so you got low fantasy and high fantasy. So low fantasy is kind of somewhat more like magical realism. It's kind of set in our world rather than like a high fantasy where it's all in a created universe. And I kind of had this idea of like what's left of the gods, like this idea of this universe where the gods have died off the less they're believed in, but the ones that have been kept alive through pop culture, Odin, Loki, Thor, ones from other cultures too, so that would be like the hero twins from the Mayas, and the Thunderbird maybe from North America, from the Pacific coast, those kind of things, and get them, like, they decide to play what is essentially a game of chess where they manipulate certain humans and decide to go to war, use those humans as these chess pieces to find each other across the world, battle each other, and whoever wins is essentially the reigning god of the forgotten, essentially. But I never got around to writing it, and because I don't really know if I want it to be a graphic novel or if I want to finally take a stab at novels, at prose. But that's one idea I had, and then I wanted to maybe look at doing a high fantasy where it's in this set universe where we take elements from Mesoamerica, ancient Europe, things like that, but that really didn't get much beyond there as an idea, because it's going to be a lot of vested time to bring something like that to fruition. While I didn't fully enjoy American Gods in its book form, I preferred it in its TV show form, because it told itself a little bit more straightforward in the TV show. Which I'm not against fractured storytelling, it's just, it felt a little bit convoluted, but I've got to take my hat off to Neil Gaiman. Like, he did a fantastic job, like knowing how hard that is to do myth punk and on that level. He's done something fantastic with American Gods.
Yeah, me and my partner just started watching it actually a week or two ago. It's brilliant. I don't know as much as I'd like about mythology, so it's like really cool to learn it in that way. So easy to consume, right? It's not like you're sitting there and reading a book, and yeah. What advice would you have for someone who was interested in trying to write their first graphic novel? That's a question we get very often, but it's always a great answer.
So as a writer, and if you're not also going to be doing the artwork, I should give you this in a linear sequence so that I'm not confusing you unnecessarily. The first thing is to learn how to write for graphic novels. A lot of people learn in school how to write prose. That's pretty much the standard definition of learning how to write fiction, and the base entry point. But that doesn't mean that it's any easier. Again, I'll take my hats off to prose writers any day of the week. But what I learned in university was screenwriting, and that's before I discovered that I really wanted to write for graphic novels. Long after comic books had been in my life, they'd been in my life since I was a child. But what I learned when I came to write for comic books is that from learning screenwriting, I'd already had the tool sets that I needed in my repertoire to write for graphic novels, because it really is a script writing format. It's very similar to screenwriting. So learn that and look at examples of comic book scripts, because you're essentially going to be breaking down the page by page heading, so page number, panel heading. Then you're going to, underneath the panel heading, put your description, similar to how you'd put action in a screenplay. But you're going to describe everything that you want to happen, the way you want it to be framed, the camera angle, distance, spacing, background, foreground, any midpoint of action that should be shown in that one panel, in that action. Then you're going to put a one-line break, then you're going to put your character head in for dialogue, and then write in the dialogue, put a couple of line spacing down, then start on your next panel heading, and then, rinse and repeat, right? That's the first thing, is learn how to write for this medium. It's a visual medium. Learn and understand it, read a lot of graphic novels, watch a lot of movies too, so you can get that idea. But then what you want to do is, then you're going to come to the point of finding an artist and do your research, but also find a way to fund the artist, because artists normally, especially at the skill level that comes in at comic books, and Jasmine can attest to this, they're putting in so much work that this is their time where they would otherwise be working a job to put food on the table. So you're essentially paying them for that time to put food on the table. And it really is that much of a time sink. You're talking 1 to 2 days for a page, and I'm not kidding there, sometimes longer. And so you should find ways to fund them. We've got things like it's now called SK Arts, but it was called the Saskatchewan Arts Board here in the province. Find out ways to write a good application, and research what you need for an application. And you can even email them and call them. They'll give you tips on how to begin. There's also Kickstarter. Find out how to do a Kickstarter, what works on ones that worked, what failed on ones that didn't work. And then do your research on the artist themselves. Does their portfolio match up with the image that you have in your head for the comic book? And if they don't really have a portfolio, ask them to show you one, like if they don't really have a website yet, or something like that. And the main thing to find out how much it's going to cost you is ask the artist what is their page rate for a finished page, and then times it by the number of pages you have, and if they agree to do it for you, you know, you've got a ballpark figure of this is how much it's going to cost you. In terms of getting published, work on writing your first graphic novel first, but once you get to that point, you want to find out how to have good elevator pitch. So elevator pitch means, imagine you have walked into an elevator and you've realized beside you is like the head of a publishing corporation, or, you know, editor-in-chief, whatever, and you've got 10 seconds between the floors where you're both going to get off. You've got to sell your book succinctly in those 10 seconds. That's an elevator pitch. Come up with a good one of those, both verbal, practice it verbally and written. And then you've got to really get good at making submission packages to publishers, and they should include 6 to 10 finished or roughly finished artwork pages. They don't want to see your written script, and I'm sorry to break that to everyone. Screenwriting and comic book writing is different in that sense. They really want to see test video. If it's film, what do they call those? Screeners, test screens. They want to see those. If it's film, if it's graphic novels and comic books, they want to see roughly finished art pages. And you want to have that in a continuous page PDF, the first page of which should be your cover letter. And you should really do the research on what the publisher is. Do they publish books that are similar to mine? If not, you're gonna be swimming upstream. You're gonna be swimming against the tide. And I would not recommend that for your first time out. You can publish stuff with a publisher, and once that relationship builds, then you can say, hey, I've got stuff that's outside of your normal ballpark. At that point, as an author on their roster, they would be interested at that point in looking at your other work that goes beyond what they publish.
Is there any training techniques you would suggest for like a new artist, for starting a page? Like how would you section that off?
I think that might be a better question for Jasmine, to be honest with you.
For sure, yeah, let's open it up.
Oh, like how to section off a page? Quite specifically, just that's actually my favorite part of the whole process is paneling. Is figuring out how the page is going to be chopped up. Are there 3 panels? Are there 2? Are there 8? And then which panel, unless the writer has told you specifically, which panel do you think should command the most attention? So if I got a page of script and it was like, okay, let's say 6 panels, and 5 of them are dialogue, and in one there's action. Maybe another character in the dialogue has punched him. Yeah, they punched the other guy in the face. So, panels 1 through 5, talk, 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 talk. Panel 6, punch. I'm reading that. Okay, panel 6 will be the biggest panel, and maybe the other panels. Okay, so talk, 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 talk. Okay, I'll make them all exactly the same size up to a certain point, symmetrical sort of panel. I used to making these choices as we go along. If it's particularly crazy sort of action that's in the script, well then you like
a build up. You gotta have it like the action angle panels.
The angles once like, oh okay, things are getting crazy. There's gonna be some diagonals up in here now.
I saw that. Yeah.
If things aren't crazy, if we're in exposition land, then the diagonals sometimes look out of place unless something cool was said.
Yeah.
You're going with a lot of your gut feelings, and if you're just writer's block, you don't know how to panel it out, grab a stack of comics from the shelf and start flipping through them. And you're like, you're not necessarily looking for poses to copy. You're just looking for the size and shapes of their squares. Mm-hmm. You're like, I like the way they mapped that out. I might do something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I would add, sorry to interrupt there, but another thing I would add is also, again, to go back to film, study some of the best storyboarders in the industry. You can find like go and Google search storyboards for and add in the name of like some of the Oscar-winning movies. Or some of the biggest blockbusters like Star Wars, all of that. The way that they do not all the panels of the storyboard are the same. They do like big ones for the big action ones and stuff like that. Very similar to comic books in that sense. And so that's a good thing to study as well.
Yeah, research is definitely key when starting a new career, hobby. Sometimes it turns out in the beginning, but you never know. Hobbies can always turn out to be careers. Yeah. I'll check the chat, see if there is any. Do you guys have any more questions? Okay. Do you think starting out as a Zine, am I saying that wrong? As a
scene. Yeah, I always say that wrong too. Yeah.
I thought it was Zine.
Yeah, I did as well, but I guess you meant to pronounce it like it's the end of magazine.
I guess, like that does make sense, but Zine is like so much more fun. Do you think starting out as a graphic novel would be a good first step before diving fully into that?
Yeah, before jumping into publishing, because you might want to decide to go the self-publishing route and you then go to learn marketing, especially after you've invested that money in printing, whether you get that through Artboard or you do it from your own dollar. Going the zine route first or the webcomic route first is a lot lower pressure. It's maybe a faster way to reach a small audience to begin with, and it can help you build up that portfolio for sure.
Yeah, and it just takes like something small, and you can like start talking to comic book shops, and you can start talking like Ganbatte. Like we try and have charity tables or like free local guest tables. Like we'll try and have at least like 15, so that if someone's producing something, they can share it with all of the Ganbatte community for as free when we can, right? I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited to get events started up again, and you saying that February might have something coming out is like perfect timing if we get everything, because like during COVID it's a little bit difficult to keep volunteers trained because a lot of volunteers, they age out of Ganbatte because we have a lot of youth. Right. And so having these youth and then they hit like 25 and they're like, oh, I got a career now. Like I'll be there for the events, but I don't have time to do all the back end stuff. So it's me and a few people doing the back end stuff, and then we have to train all the volunteers on having an event because of all the switchover. And so I'm hoping we could do a drop of Ganbatte in like February. Like
that would be awesome.
So you mentioning that is like really, I was like, maybe we could work something out. But it would just be very small. It would be something like we let everybody set up a table and like because like some provinces are still closed right now. I know Saskatchewan's open, but what if we do something in February and we're still a little sketched out about indoor stuff, so we just make everyone wear masks and do like a little tiny gathering, just to get the volunteers trained and gets the word out about all the creators. And I'm gonna be hitting you up because you've done all those interviews with all those creators, right? Like, hand out some tables. Just get everything started again. It's just gonna take a lot of paperwork. This table's filled with Ganbatte paperwork. I just like moved it over to pretend it didn't exist for the camera. But Mike has a question here. Have you read Neil Gaiman's take on Norse mythology, and what is your opinion of it, if you have?
It's absolutely fantastic. The way that he writes it, and the beautiful way that he ends the book. Because in the Ragnarok, or the translations of Ragnarok, that's part of the Edda anyway, but the translation of the Edda, the Ragnarok just kind of ends, and you find out that the final two humans, one man, one woman, survived in the was it last elm or poplar tree on the edge of Scandinavia. but he's got this beautiful way that he ends it, where he's put his own voice on it, his own Neil Gaiman voice on it, where he says that the new gods that come around, and there's a new pantheon of gods that come around afterwards, they see these little things shining in the grass, in the long grass, and they walk up to them and they find them, because they're these young gods, and they find the chess pieces, but they look exactly like, because they never knew who Odin and Loki and Thor were, but they find them. And as playful young gods, they decide to set up a chess table. And the suggestion is that the game will all begin again, but this time they'll have more fun with it. And by playing this game of chess, they'll learn the mistakes. And it's just this beautiful way of ending it. And that is the part of Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology that really stuck with me. The way that he really flashes out the humour that was already there, with, like I say, that wild story of how Sleipnir came to be, which, go and read about that. That's amazing. I honestly think Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology is probably the best universalization, if you will, of Norse mythology that we've had. Like, it took it away from the stuffy academia and put it into everyone's hands, and I think that's my hat is eternally off to him for doing that.
For sure. Well, I think we are nearing the end of time. We did start like a little bit late, so we went till like 2:15 instead. Is there anything that you want to touch base on about your upcoming comic? I would love to interview you again and have like, I've just been a little busy with work, so I wasn't as prepared as I would love to be, but I'd love to interview you again closer to the date when the book is released, and we could do another thing, and we could have questions for your artist. Yeah. I saw Elaine did the type. She did the text. I feel like text is like really tedious, but like I remember talking to her one time when you guys came into Bartari, and she was saying about like how she had like worked on improving the letters, and she was going on, and she's like, I don't know if this is boring. I was like, no, please keep talking. I love it.
Lettering is interesting because nobody thinks about it. It's essentially the last step that comes along. But one final thing I'll add in before we go here is that pre-orders will be up within the next few days here. I don't have an exact date or time, but pre-orders will be up on Amazon Canada. They'll be up through your local bookshop. So you can go and ask them to order it in, because it's available through Raincoast, which will be which is the main distributor for books in Canada. And pre-orders for comic bookshops will be way down the line yet, but pre-orders for bookshops, Amazon Canada, if anyone's watching from the UK, Amazon UK, bookshops in the UK too, but just bear in mind that it won't actually be in your hands until February 16th, 2022.
Okay, that sounds amazing though. It's very exciting every time you guys have something else that you guys are working on together. Like, you guys are you guys just churn stuff out. Like, you guys just stay up at night, like, how can we amaze the comic community next? You know. I've got some big things planned next, which there's obviously the next Siegfried book, which will be a little while off yet, but I'm doing something that's related to an untold part of Canadian history that relates to a community that has been historically overlooked, but they're now a prominent part of Canada, and that's the Chinese Canadians. And I've done it with that community's involvement. So this isn't me coming along and putting my white man's voice over that. That's I've worked very, very diligently on the research, on the history, working with the community, and I'm so excited to write this thing, because it's been a couple of years of research, or a year and a half of research already, but that's a big thing that when I get to announce that would be exciting. Yeah, it's always I'm always intrigued in how much research you put in, and like when I used to see you out at our events and stuff, anytime we would talk, I would just be like amazed of like some other thing that you're like diving into. The Google holes you must go down. Oh my lord.
And the amount of like library and archives Canada purchases,
do you spend a lot of time at the U of S library or anything like that? Like, do you go? Is there a library you go to research mythology in Saskatoon at all?
Mythology, yeah, and the libraries carry a good amount of the translations too, like the public libraries. But for this upcoming book, yeah, it's been a lot of like, there's even been like the National Archives of Australia that I had to remotely make a purchase from.
That's cool.
Because because it's related to military, and it's in part at least. And the Australians were the only ones to carry records because it was so top secret that everyone else kind of purged the records.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting when they kind of like purge the records or like something disappears and then like people are like, we gotta keep it alive, whisper, like the only way it's kept alive is just like fan fiction, like.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, does that mean in like 2050 people are gonna like look back and like discover Tumblr? That sounds awful.
And Vines.
Oh yeah, Vine.
Yeah.
I had a Vine to like follow people, but my only Vine video, it was like, sorry guys, I can't go out today, I have to wash my hair, and it was just like a pan of my bathroom and there was like 40 wigs hanging in there. Yeah. Vine was a good time. Now we have TikTok. I got told the other day that Facebook is for old people.
Yeah, I've not entered TikTok yet, and I've really got no intention of.
It's such a time waster, but it's addicting because it's like a little intimidating though, because like you could be scrolling, and if you pause on a video, it reads that data, and then all of a sudden it'll show you 5 other videos about that thing that you just watched, and so it's just like, it's an addiction. It truly is. But you can learn a lot. Like I'll just randomly learn about weird things. Like, no, I don't know. Spiders don't like blue paint on eaves trough. They won't build spider webs if you paint your eaves troughs like weird TikTok things. And now that we've been talking about mythology, I bet you if I go on TikTok after I'm done hosting Ganbatte today, it's just gonna be like cool mythology stuff, because my phone's definitely listening. But anyways, let's end this. I'll have a recording, and hopefully the YouTube team will get something up within the next probably month or so, and then we'll just have a YouTube video that we can share around. And I'm hoping to do in August and September some sort of interview or like just a highlight of an artist or something, plus maybe some game nights. And there has been a request for cosplay in the park again, because the last one that we did yesterday was so popular, except they're hoping that the next one we could try and do some sort of animals in the park, so then everybody could just like wear cute ears, and I could phone all the animal shelters and they could try and like get some adoptions going. But I need to check into some parameters on legalities of hosting events in the park, because even though it's like a free public space, you don't know about setting up a table for the pet shelters stuff. So I just gotta make a few phone calls. But it's exciting that we're getting back to it, guys. We're getting back to it slowly, and
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna have streaming AMVs in the Discord for a little bit, and then at 3 p.m. we're having a cosplay printing design panel. So I will switch over. It's been amazing having you too, and thank you everyone, and thank you everyone for listening. Sorry for cutting off there.
Yeah, no worries. I was just gonna say, yeah, thank you everybody. Really appreciate you watching, asking questions. If you can pass on my thanks to the people that had to leave, I really appreciate their questions and their involvement. As an author, I only exist when people read my books, right? So I genuinely appreciate you from the bottom of my heart.
Feel free to like send me a write-up, and I'll make sure to post that in the chat and on the Ganbatte Facebook page,
Sure.
so we can get some marketing up or whatever you need.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm just gonna end this.